Hello and welcome to the HIS Guitar channel. This is episode 2 in the series on how to create cover tracks, and as you can see in this episode we're going to talk about bass guitar. Before we get into that, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon for notifications to make sure that you never miss any of my future videos. Thank you. So let's get into this. Let's start by talking about gear setup. So if I just flip over to this. My gear setup isn't necessarily going to be the same as everyone's, and there's all different ways that you can do this, and there's lots of different devices that allow you to plug your guitar into your computer for recording. But I'm going to run through my setup and explain some of the basics of what I'm trying to do with it. So, we've got either the bass guitar like this or the electric guitar. My bass guitar is a passive guitar, and that'll become important as we talk through all of these devices. First thing I plug it into is an effects pedal. I've got a Volwa pedal. This is it can switch between volume pedal for volume swells or a wah-wah pedal. Note the wah-wah pedal's only for electric guitar. It only deals with shape and treble. It doesn't deal with bass, but I can still use it as a volume pedal for the bass. So it goes into that. The output of that then comes into an Ultra DI. This is direct input box. So these do two things. One thing they do is with a passive guitar like a passive bass, the signal can be quite weak and it's definitely unbalanced. So if you put that directly into the PC through an interface, which we'll talk about in a minute, what you get is a very low volume, low gain input. And if you turn the gain up, you just get a muddy sound, a really terrible muddy sound, especially on bass. So what a DI does, a direct input does, is it converts that unbalanced passive signal to a balanced signal. That's its main job, and that just improves the volume level of it, and it also improves, reduces the muddiness of it and makes it a clearer signal, which is great. Another thing it does is it does something called ground lift. Now, when you've got like a pedal chain like this, and you're going into an amplifier, the amplifier itself acts as the ground for the entire circuit. When you're plugging into a computer, the grounding is a bit more, basically you end up with multiple grounds, because you've got the grounding of the pedal, you've got the grounding of the guitar interface, and then the actual PC itself. And when you get multiple grounds, you can end up with a ground loop that causes hum, electrical hum and electrical noise. So another thing that a DI box does is it does something called a ground lift, which is what an amplifier normally does. And this will reduce the amount of hum and noise that you get from the guitar overall. The next thing is the most important part, and if you're going to buy anything for recording, this is the part you absolutely 100% need. The other parts are just to help with sound quality and effects. This is the guitar interface. Now, I just have a really cheap, Behringer guitar link, and it's just a USB link with a jack socket for the guitar. This is only a 16-bit input and 48 kilohertz input, so it's really not the high quality of some of the others that you can buy out there. This one was quite cheap, and it does for my purposes at the moment. This then obviously goes into your computer, and in your computer we then have lots of different pieces of software. The main thing you're going to need is a low latency driver. Now, there's actually some open source versions of this. These are ACO drivers. So there's ACO for all, which is quite good, but it's exclusive, so nothing else can listen to the audio or use the same audio devices at the same time. There's Flex ACO, which is quite good because it's non-exclusive, but the problem with it is that it also has basically quite a advanced setup, so it's all via properties files, so there's no UI to help with setup. And the last one, the one I use, is FL Studio's ACO drivers, and they're very good because they've got UI, which makes it easy to actually adjust and change your audio inputs and outputs, and they also have the ability to be non-exclusive, so other devices and other pieces of software can also use your audio device at the same time. So that's what I use. You then need a DAW, which is a desktop audio workstation. There's lots of these out there, but I choose to use Traction Waveform. It's a free version of that. There is a pro version as well, but I use the free version. And then after that, you're using effects, and we'll come to effects when we talk about tone a little later on. So that's my gear setup, and hopefully gives you an understanding of how you would get the guitar input into your PC. What if you don't have a bass guitar? Well, one thing you can do is a little trick with the electric guitar. So the 4 strings that are on a bass guitar are actually in standard tuning the same tuning as the 4 low strings on an electric guitar. So you can record an electric guitar playing the bass line on the low 4 strings, and they are 1 octave above where the bass guitar is. So after you record it, you can use a pitch shift effect in your DAW to bring it down an octave, or 12 cents as it is in the pitch shifter. And that will then give you the bass line, which is good if you don't have a bass guitar or you don't play bass guitar at all. It's not exactly the same level of sound quality. It sounds a little more muddy than a bass guitar does, because you're using that pitch shifter to tone it down. There can also be quite a bit of latency if you're trying to play and listen along live, because the pitch shift actually takes time to do. So if you remember from the previous episode, we had finished up with a drum track. Here it is here. So that sounds pretty good. Today we need to record this bass on top of that. So the first thing we need to do is think about tone. So let's take this track 1, we'll expand it. We're going to make this the bass guitar. So let's name it first of all. And then we need to select input. So in this drop down here, you've got the input selection. It's input 1 for us. And you need to hit this button to be able to record from it. You'll see down here there's live input monitoring. This allows you to actually hear the bass, and we'll solo this so that we don't have the drum beat behind us when we're trying to record it in this particular case. Now, if I play this just now, you can hear the volume level is quite low. You're not getting a huge amount out of it. That's because we haven't set up our Amplifier Simulators. So let's start doing that just now. Just before we go there though, tone also is affected by the guitar itself, and obviously all the knobs down here. So in my case I've got 2 pickups, so I've actually put the mix of the volume on 100% on both pickups. On the neck pickup I've got the tone up full, and on the bridge pickup I've got the tone down low, giving me a kind of fairly deep sound, but with a little bit of presence to it, and a little bit of treble to it, all the same. Let's talk about preamps first. So I prefer uh, VSTs from Ignite Labs. They've got some great free ones. They've also got some great paid for ones as well. Today I'm going to use their bass guitar preamp SHB1, which looks like this. This is quite good, quite a good preamp simulator. I'm going to take the treble all the way down and the bass all the way up. You can play about with the equalization settings, the gain, and so on, but this is what I'm going to do for this particular track. I also want it to sound quite deep. Now, let's listen to what change that's made. So it's a little bit louder and a little bit deeper, but we're still not there yet. So our next thing is power amplifier. And again, I'm going to use a VST from Ignite Labs simply because I like what they've done and they're free. So I'm going to use a TPA1, which looks like this. Now, with the power amp, it really should just deal with it really should just pass through, but at a higher volume. But what I want to do is up the depth fully in this particular case to give us a nice deep sound. So let's hear what it's like now. So that's not bad. I think I'm going to turn the preamp volume up a little bit. So that sounded pretty good so far. Now, the last thing we need is a cabinet simulator. So again, using something from Ignite Labs. This is NAD-IR. Now, NAD-IR is an impulse response cabinet simulator. Now, impulse responses are basically wave files that have been recorded based on a white noise signal coming through a real cabinet setup and then being mic'd up and recorded. And with impulse response, what you can essentially do is reproduce the flavor of sound that you would get from that particular cabinet setup. So I'm going to center all this. There's lots of different settings you can have here, but I'm not going to go into detail on them. What I'm going to do is use some 1960 Marshall amps, and we should get a nice sort of warm, deep sound from them. So let's hear what it sounds like just now. Okay, so not too bad, but we need a bit more volume. So what I think we'll do, we put this to about 3/4. That's not bad, but let's turn the power amp up a little as well to about the same. So that's given us quite a nice volume in general, and it's a nice deep tone that we're getting from the guitar. There's a lot you can do with this, and there's also a lot of other VST plugins that allow you to get all sorts of different tones, and there's absolute ton of recordings of impulse responses for various manufacturers of cabinets out there. So, and they're mainly freeware, although there's some paid for ones which are better quality recordings. But you can hear that the tone we've got is pretty good for what we want. So let's close those down for now. What are we actually going to record? So let's go to The Wire by Haim. If you recall from previous episodes, we're recording the guitar solo and the outro. So if we look at in Songster, if we look at the tab for the bass, you can see it's using the triplets all the way through, and it's the bass note of the chord for each bar. And if you look for the guitar solo, there are 4 bars that then repeat. So we're just going to record the 4 bars by themselves and then repeat them in editing. So let's do that bit first. So we've got this set to record. We'll hit the record button. And I'm just going to... So that's our recording. We can stop it now. If we listen back to it, got a lot of white empty space and some noise at the start here, obviously, before we got into it. So that sounds not too bad. That's our 4 bars, which we can then repeat. Now, we've got a lot of empty space at the start and the end of it, and also it's more than 4 bars in length that we did it here. So, a couple of things we need to do. First things first, I noticed that we didn't set the tempo in the last episode. So, the overall tempo is 112 BPM. So, let's set that here to 112, and that'll change where these bar markers are, which will just help us when we try to set the timing of this to be precise. If we select the recording, we also need to be able to stretch and squash the length of the recording. And if we do that normally, it doesn't respect the pitch. So what we need to do is we need to actually mark it as time stretching, and I use Elastic Pro here. There's all different versions here. The main thing about each of these versions is how much CPU they use when they're running, because they run in real time when you're playing back the audio. So I'm going to use the Pro version. What we want to do is get rid of all this white space at the front. So if we zoom in, we can see, we can actually see the waveform, and we can see that the first bass note starts around about here. So if I drag this across to where the start of it is, and I can zoom right in to get a fairly accurate view of where the start is, I can get rid of all of that empty space at the front, and then I can do the same on the end as well. So let's drag that in, and we can see signals ending round about here-ish. So we can drag that right in, and then we've just got the actual 4 bars and none of the white space at either side, and that gets rid of any noise that was coming from the guitar or from ourselves, hitting the strings and so on. So now that that's there, we can drag it back to the start to bar 1. And this is meant to be 4 bars, so it should end here, but you can see I did it a little too slow, and it took me almost to the end of the 5th bar. So we've got this set to stretch. What we can now do is hold down the Alt key and drag this endpoint back to where we want to stretch it, or in this case squash it up to. And it squashes it up to be at the right level. Now we want these 4 bars repeated, so we can copy this, we can click where we want it and paste it in, and that's us got our entire guitar solo recorded. Now before I play it back so we can hear it, let's add in a marker to show where the start and finish of our guitar solo is. So what we can do is down here we can select the markers section. We can go down here and we can create a new bars and beats marker, which comes up here. We can then drag the end of it to the end of our entire guitar solo, and then we can name the marker just here, guitar solo. Now it does nothing to the recording, but it just gives us a visual guide at the top here of where our guitar solo starts and ends, and we can do this with multiple parts across the whole thing. Now I'm going to turn off the listening to the live bass just now. Let's listen to what we have recorded by itself. So I can see a slight issue with it, and that is that we're not necessarily in time for every single bar. Some bars we start a little early, sometimes we're starting a little late. if I go to bar 2, for example, you can hear we're sometimes not quite hitting the right timing. Timing's a bad thing for me. I'm not great at timing and I tend to make mistakes, but that's why we have the ability to edit the audio afterwards. So let's play this first one. So this first one's actually not bad. It seems to be roughly on time. But what we can do is we can split at the cursor point so that we get just the bar as itself. Then we can listen to bar 2. So bar 2 going into bar 3, you can see it starts a little late, because if I go just here and listen, you can hear the change is happening around about here. So what we can do is we can split the clip at the cursor where the change happens. We can go to this this bar 2. We can notice that it doesn't quite match up with bar 3. We can hold down Alt and we can drag this in to squash it in using the Elastic Pro stretch, which then allows us to be right on the bar. And we can do the same to pull the other one out. So now when we go to this bar, the change is bang on the bar marker, which is exactly what we need. So let's keep going with that. Let's try the next bar. And again, we're slightly late. We're changing round about there. So let's just double check that. Yes, so we're changing just about here. So again, we can split the clip at the cursor and we can adjust it using the Alt key to put it where it belongs. And then we can listen again to this bar. So that sounds great. That's our first 5 bars and they're now timed perfectly. Now, because I'd already copied it, our second lot is slightly off. So let's delete that. We can click on this one and we can hold down Shift and select the whole of it. We can copy that with Control C and then paste it with Control V right here. And then if we listen to the whole thing, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to it with the drum track included so that you can hear the overall timing of it. So for the guitar solo, that's sounding pretty good. Now we need to record the other section, which is the outro section. So let's turn the recording back on. Let's set the bass to solo. And then let's have a little look at the tab so that we understand what we're doing. So we've done these 8 bars of the guitar solo. Now we're in the outro, and you can see it's the root node again, but a single node with a slide, and then rest for the rest of the bar. And we do that for the 3 different chords. And then we are just playing the triplets again across the entire bar here. So that's pretty straightforward. So let's go record that. Now, I messed that up slightly, so I'm going to abort and restart. That's better that time. So the first time around there, you may have noticed that I hit one too many notes on the triplet part. Okay, so now we've got that recording. Again, we can set the time stretching to Elastic Pro. Again, we want to trim off the lack of sound at the start and end. So let's do that just now. So we can drag this in, and then we can zoom right in to see where the audio actually starts, round about there. And we can do the same on the end. We can drag this right in, and then we can zoom in. Looks like there's a bit of noise there, so I think it's actually ending about there roughly. Yeah, that'll do. So we've now trimmed off the edges of the recording. We want to put this in place, and we can see we actually played it slightly too quick. So we can extend this out, holding down the Alt key to the end of the 4 bars. We also want a section marker, so we can again go to markers and we can do new bars and beats marker. We can drag this marker out for the 4 bars, and we can rename it to being the outro. So there we go, we got the outro marker in place. Now, what we can see is we have a lot of timing issues with this. So let's just listen to the recording first. Okay, so it's not too bad, but the timing is definitely out. So let's start at the beginning. So we just want, if you look back at the tab, we want the note and the slide to occur in the first beat only. So if we look here, we can find the end of that note and slide, and we can select it, and we can split it at the cursor position. We can find the start of the next one, which is just about here-ish. And again, we can split at the cursor position. Now, this part in between is just white space. There is no, it's just background noise. So we can actually take that right out, because we won't need it in our recording. So going back to this first note and slide, we want it to be a whole beat. And what we can see is it's slightly short of the whole beat, because there's the whole beat marker, there's the start of beat 2. So beat 1 should last for that whole time. So we need to select this and stretch it out to go for the whole 1 beat there, so it ties in nicely. So that's great, we've got it in place. Next bar, we want to do the same again. So we already cut the front of this, we just need to make sure it's right. It looks about right, so that's okay. And then we want to cut the other end. We want to cut the end of the actual slide, so again, just about here. We need to select it, split the clip at cursor, and then we need to do the same at the start of the next one, which is just here. We need to again split the clip at the cursor, and this white noise section, background noise section here, we can just get rid of with the delete key. And now we can select this and get it to the right position. So you can see we started it slightly late, so we can drag it back to where it belongs, which is the start of bar 10, because there's our bar 9 and there's our bar 10. And you can also see we were a lot shorter on this one as well. It should have been the whole beat, and there's the beat 2 marker. So we need to stretch this out, holding down the Alt key, drag it across and stretch it to where it should be. Great, so then let's do the next one. So our end of the audio for this is just about there, I would imagine, looking at it. We can select a clip, we can cut it where it is, same as before. Now there's the start of our triplets for that last bar, and we need to zoom in just a little and select where it is, and we can again split at the cursor position. This again, we don't need, because it's just background noise, so we'll delete that section, and then we'll move back across. Now this should start at start bar 11. You can see it started early, so we can drag it to where it belongs, and then we can see where the beat 2 marker is, and we can stretch this out to mark it out to our beat 2 marker. So that's that bit done as well. Finally, there's the triplets here, which are right across. Now we can see that they started a bit too early, so we can squash this up using the Alt key and dragging it to the start of bar 12. We've now got all of it there recorded, and we've sorted out in the editing the timing. So let's now listen back to that. So that sounds okay. But one thing is that the slides sound a bit louder than the triplet sections. And you can actually see from the waveform that it's actually quite a bit taller, as in louder and higher amplitude, than the waveforms for the triplet sections. So there is a way we can deal with that. We can go to the top of the track here, and we can select FX, Add Effect, and Volume. This then gives us this blue bar. And if we drag that blue bar down, we can then set the volume. Now, I think that's a little too much that I did there. Let's bring it to about there. Okay, so now when we listen to this, it's more in line. If I just go back one little bit, you can hear that the volume level is kind of even across both. So we'll do that to all these single note slides to make sure that the volume matches what we have elsewhere. So let's bring it all the way down to about there. Maybe a slight touch more. Yep, that looks about right. And we'll do the same with this one as well. So I'm just looking at the waveform size and using that as my guide. There is another way we can do this, which is to look at, if I go back to this bar, if we watch the volume indicator here, we can see roughly where it lands and if it gets louder when it gets to this section. So let's listen to that. So you can see it's about 75%. And it's hitting about the same. So it's pretty even in terms of sound across the board there. So now we've completed the entire part. We've got our final bass line. Let's listen to the whole thing as our final cut. So I think that's sounding pretty good overall. That's our final cut of the bass. So we managed to get all our bass sorted out, edited and recorded and edited. And hopefully you'll stay tuned for the next video, which will cover the rhythm guitar. And we'll build on this as we go. So hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Cheers.